We are now going to sew the exterior pockets and the front ring holder. Okay, so we need to take your piece A, one of your piece A's. This is my exterior piece, and I need one interior piece. Now you'll notice that it is interfaced. I cut back the interfacing on 3 of the sides, or the 2 sides and the bottom, but I left it going up to the edge on the top. Here, this one shows it a little better. It goes all the way up to the edge at the top. That's going to be my top edge. I want to make sure the top of my pocket has some interfacing so that it stays strong. But there's going to be a lot of top stitching and layers at these side and bottom edges, so I trimmed back the interfacing. So if you have a directional print, make sure you're sewing the top of the directional print to the top of the pocket. And I'm going to match my raw edges together. And I'm going to sew. Now this is a different seam allowance than the rest of the pattern. This is a 3/4 inch seam allowance, and yes, I know that's gigantic. But the reason why is later on in the pattern, when we're sewing this pocket piece to the top accent piece, if we have a smaller seam allowance, it'll be too easy to sew the top of the pocket into that seam. So this is why we do a 3/4 inch seam allowance. And then I'll definitely need to trim the top of this seam. And trim it like this. And press this seam, but if I do that, my green fabric will shrink a little. So I'm just going to press it with my fingers. And then I'm going to top stitch across the top. And just to make things easier, I'm going to baste around the other 3 edges. Okay, now you can treat this as one piece of fabric. Okay. So you may not be able to see this, but I transferred the mark from my pattern piece, this X, onto this fabric as a little chalk mark. It's also 4 inches from the bottom, if you are using the cut chart, 4 inches from the bottom, and equal distance from the sides, which I believe is 5 inches from each side. I'm going to take my front ring connector that I have right here, and I'm going to center it on top of my dot. Now it's really easy for this to shift because I can't pin it. I'm actually going to use my chalk and draw a little line around where this is going to end up being. I'm going to maybe draw chalk at these corners as well. If you have a fabric marker, that works too. But on this fabric, chalk is my best option, and it'll come right off later. Okay. So now this can be a little tricky, keeping everything in place. So if you can pin it, I'd recommend pinning it. So I'm going to take off my clips over here and just hold everything in place. And I'm going to start at one corner and sew a box. About 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. And I am not using, I should have used my zipper foot, but I did not. I'm going to back stitch to get across this part. And just keep back stitching so I can get back to the beginning of my square. Okay. And I have my first side sewn on. And now I'm going to sew the other side on. And I'm going to make sure everything is still lined up with my chalk. Again, I'm going to back stitch at this part. And I'm going to keep back stitching to get to the edge of the rectangle. All right, and I'm finished with this part. Okay, so I'm finished with this. I'm going to kind of wipe off my chalk. So I'm done. Oops. Make sure that you know where the top is at. Okay, so now I have a second lining A piece. And I am going to arrange this pocket that I just made on top of it. I'm going to line up the raw edges on the bottom, and there will end up being about 3/4 of an inch at the top. Let me do this so you can see 3/4 of an inch at the top of exposed lining, and I'm going to baste all around the outside edge of this. And after we're done with this, I'm going to switch out of my Teflon foot for my normal foot. After we're done with this basting, we're going to repeat everything we just did, making a pocket, with a second exterior piece and 2 other lining pieces. All of them the piece A pieces. And then I'll have my 2 pockets done. One for the front, one for the back. Okay, so now I'm gonna do the same thing with my other 3 piece A's. Okay, now I have my front pocket done and my identical back pocket done. And we're ready to start putting together the exterior, which we'll have to do later because I have to pick up a kid from sports practice and my baby just woke up too.